The chair across from her stayed empty long enough for the coffee to cool and the hopeful warmth in her chest to fade. Sarah watched the door of the cafe with a patience she had learned over years of waiting, counting the seconds by the rhythm of people's footsteps she could not hear. Her phone buzzed once, then stayed silent. The barista called out names she could only guess by the way lips moved. This was supposed to be her first date in 3 years, her first brave step back into the world after learning how easily it could forget you. Instead, she sat alone, fingers wrapped around a mug, wondering how many minutes were polite before lonely turned embarrassing. Sarah had been deaf since she was 6. Illness had taken her hearing quickly, leaving a ringing absence and a life that required constant translation. She read lips well, carried a small notebook for strangers, and used an app on her phone that turned speech into text with imperfect accuracy. Dating had always been a minefield. Some people were kind but awkward, some were curious in the way children poke at unfamiliar things, and some simply vanished when they realized the effort required. Tonight's date, a man she had met through a friend, had seemed different. He had messaged thoughtfully, asked about her favorite books, promised he was learning basic signs. Yet here she was, alone under soft cafe lights that made everyone else look paired and complete. She took a breath and reminded herself she was not broken for being left. Still, the familiar ache settled in her throat. She stood to leave, gathering her bag, when the chair scraped across the floor beside her and a small hand tugged at her sleeve. A little boy with curls the color of chestnuts looked up at her with solemn eyes and then grinned. 3 more children appeared behind him like a mirror, same curls, same eyes, same matching jackets in different bright colors. They stared at her as if she were a puzzle they were eager to solve. Before Sarah could react, a man rushed over, eyes wide with apology. He was tall, a bit rumpled, wearing a jacket that had seen too many mornings of spilled juice and too few nights of rest. He crouched down, signing something quickly to the children, then looked at Sarah and spoke, his lips forming words slowly and clearly. "I am so sorry. They are curious. They don't usually approach strangers." He gestured to his ears and then to his hands, signing the same sentence again, halting but sincere. Sarah's surprise turned into a smile she hadn't expected. "You sign," she signed back, keeping her movements gentle so the children could see. The man's face lit up with relief. "A little learning," he signed. "For them." He nodded toward the quadruplets, who were now tugging at each other and pointing at Sarah's hands. The children began to copy her movements, their fingers clumsy but enthusiastic. The man introduced himself as Daniel. He was a single father, widowed 3 years ago, raising his 4 children on his own. He explained that they were deaf too, born that way, and sign language was the first language of their home. The cafe, usually overwhelming for Sarah, suddenly felt like a quiet island. Here was a man who didn't speak over her silence, whose children communicated in the same flowing language of hands and expressions she did. Sarah gestured to the empty chair and signed, "You can sit if you want." Daniel hesitated, glancing at the abandoned place setting. "First date?" he asked gently. She nodded. He followed her gaze to the door and understood without needing more explanation. "I'm sorry," he signed. "People can be unkind." He motioned to the children. "We can be loud in our own way. If you need quiet, we can go." Instead, Sarah found herself laughing, a silent shake that made her shoulders lift. "Stay," she signed. "I was leaving anyway." They ordered pastries and another coffee, using a mix of pointing, writing, and signing. The children introduced themselves, each eager to be first. Leo, the thoughtful one. Max, who bounced even when sitting. Ava, whose eyes missed nothing. And Nora, who leaned against Sarah's arm as if they had always known each other. They asked her questions in rapid signs. "Do you live nearby? What is your favorite color? Can you teach us a new sign?" As they talked, Daniel shared the challenges of his life. Mornings that began before sunrise. Appointments that overlapped. Nights when all 4 children cried at once and he felt like he was failing everyone. He signed with honesty, not polishing his story. Sarah listened, feeling something inside her soften. She spoke of her own struggles, of the way people often assumed she was fragile or incapable, of the dates that ended when communication felt like work instead of connection. Halfway through their conversation, the barista approached, speaking loudly and smiling as if volume could bridge any gap. Daniel gently held up his hand and signed that they were deaf. The barista flushed, apologized, and wrote an offer of free cookies on a napkin. The children cheered silently. Sarah felt seen, not singled out. When the cafe began to fill, the noise level rising in vibrations she could feel through the floor, Sarah tensed. Crowds made lip reading harder, attention scattered. Daniel noticed immediately. He signed, "Want to go outside?" The kids love the park across the street. They walked together, the children racing ahead to the swings. On a bench beneath a tree, Daniel and Sarah continued talking while keeping one eye on flying jackets and pumping legs. The sun dipped low, painting everything in gold. Daniel confessed his fear of letting anyone close. Losing his wife had carved a hollow he wasn't sure could be filled. He worried that no one would choose a man with 4 children, with a life so full of needs. Sarah admitted her own fear, that she would always be the compromise, the one people settled for out of kindness rather than love. A shout of laughter, felt more than heard, drew their attention as the children piled into a group hug, collapsing in a heap. Daniel smiled at them, exhaustion and pride mingling. "I don't know what I'm doing half the time," he signed. "But I try." Sarah reached out, hesitated, then placed her hand over his. "Trying counts," she signed. "More than people think." As dusk settled, Sarah's phone buzzed again. A message from her absent date appeared, a flimsy apology about getting caught up, asking if she was still there. Sarah looked at the words and then at Daniel and the children, at the warmth of an unexpected connection. She typed a brief reply, wished him well, and put the phone away. When it was time to leave, Daniel offered to walk her home. The children insisted on teaching her a silly sign they had invented, something between a wave and a dance. They walked slowly, stopping to watch a cat dart across the street, pointing out shapes in the clouds. At her door, Sarah felt the familiar pull of endings. Some encounters were beautiful because they were brief. She prepared herself for that. Daniel hesitated, then signed, "This might be strange. But would you like to have dinner with us sometime? Not a date, if that's too much. Just us." Sarah's heart thudded in her chest. She nodded, tears pricking her eyes. "I would like that," she signed. Weeks passed, then months. Dinners became routine, routines became comfort. Sarah helped with homework, taught the children new signs, learned their rhythms. Daniel learned to rest, to let someone else share the weight. They faced challenges together, judgmental stares in public, schools that needed advocating, moments when grief resurfaced without warning. They argued, too, about boundaries and fears, about how fast or slow to go. But they talked, hands moving honestly between them. One evening, after the children were asleep, Daniel signed what he had been holding back. "I am afraid to be happy again." Sarah took his hands. "Happiness is not a betrayal," she signed. "It is a continuation." He kissed her then, a gentle question she answered with certainty. On the anniversary of that first missed date, Sarah and Daniel returned to the cafe, the children in tow. They sat at the same table, laughter vibrating through the air. Sarah looked at the chair across from her, no longer empty, and felt a deep gratitude. Sometimes being left alone was not the end of the story. Sometimes it was the quiet moment before a life walked up, full and unexpected, and chose to stay. The message Sarah carried with her was simple and hard won. Rejection could be redirection, silence could still be filled with love. And the family you needed might not arrive the way you planned, but when it did, it would speak your language perfectly.
The bus hissed as it pulled away, leaving Daniel Harper standing on the curb with his interview folder pressed to his chest and his heart pounding like a countdown clock. In exactly 30 minutes, he was supposed to sit across from a panel that could change his life forever. Then he heard the sound that stopped him cold, a sharp cry of pain, followed by the hollow scrape of metal on concrete. A girl in a wheelchair had tipped sideways near the intersection. Her chair lay awkwardly tilted, one wheel spinning uselessly in the air. Cars passed. People glanced, hesitated, then looked away. Daniel's feet moved before his brain could argue. He dropped his folder, crossed the street, and knelt beside her. "Are you hurt?" he asked, breathless. She winced but shook her head. "I'm okay. I think the curb caught my wheel. I just need help getting upright." Daniel steadied the chair and gently lifted, careful not to jolt her. Once she was settled again, he noticed her hands trembling, not from pain, but from embarrassment. She looked about his age, maybe late 20s, dressed simply, hair pulled back, eyes sharp and tired all at once. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Most people don't stop." Daniel glanced at his watch. 22 minutes. His stomach tightened. "Do you need help getting somewhere?" She hesitated, then nodded. "I'm supposed to be across the plaza. The elevator at the pedestrian bridge is broken. It always is." Daniel looked toward the bridge, then back at her. Helping her would mean missing the interview. He had prepared for months, rehearsed answers, borrowed a suit, convinced himself this was his one real chance out of a string of dead-end jobs. His phone buzzed with a reminder notification, bright and merciless. I can push you around, he said finally. There's a longer ramp route. It'll take time, though. She studied his face, as if weighing the cost of his kindness. You don't have to. I know, he said. But I want to. They moved slowly through the plaza, navigating cracked sidewalks and impatient crowds. Daniel apologized each time the wheels caught or bumped. She laughed softly, easing his tension. I'm Maya, she said. And you are? Daniel, what were you rushing to? She asked. He exhaled. An interview. Big one. Her eyes widened slightly. Then why are you here? He shrugged, pushing through a narrow gap between planters. Seemed like the right thing. The ramp route was longer than he expected. Sweat dampened his collar. His phone buzzed again, then went silent. The interview time passed somewhere between a stuck revolving door and a delivery truck blocking the sidewalk. Daniel felt a wave of disappointment crest and settle into a dull ache. Still, he kept going. At last they reached the building across the plaza, a sleek tower of glass and steel. Maya pointed toward the entrance. You can leave me here. Security will help. Daniel nodded, relieved and oddly sad. He straightened, brushing his hands on his trousers. I hope your day gets better. She smiled, a real one this time. It already has. He walked away, shoulders heavy, replaying what-ifs in his head. By the time he reached the bus stop, his folder felt useless. He stared at the street, wondering how one good deed could cost so much. The next morning, his phone rang. Unknown number. Daniel Harper, a woman's voice asked. Yes, this is Lydia from Horizon Systems. We had you scheduled for an interview yesterday. You didn't arrive. Daniel swallowed. I know. I'm sorry. Something came up. There was a pause. Could you come in today? His heart jumped. Yes, absolutely. An hour later, Daniel stood in a polished conference room, palms damp, suit still wrinkled from yesterday's disappointment. The door opened, and the interview panel filed in. Last, through the door was Maya, rolling smoothly to the head of the table. Daniel froze. She met his eyes, recognition flashing, then warmth. Good morning, Daniel, she said. I'm Maya Chen, CEO of Horizon Systems. The room seemed to tilt. Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it again. Maya addressed the panel. Before we begin, I'd like to explain why we rescheduled this interview. She told them about the broken elevator, the curb, the crowd that walked by, and the man who missed something important to help a stranger with no expectation of reward. She spoke calmly, but her voice carried weight. At Horizon, she continued, we value skill. But we also value character. Daniel showed me who he is when he thought no one was watching. The interview itself was still rigorous. They asked about his experience, his failures, his gaps in employment. Daniel answered honestly, no longer trying to impress, just telling the truth. Maya listened carefully, occasionally asking a pointed question that cut straight to the heart of his thinking. When it was over, Daniel left the building unsure of everything. That afternoon, the call came. They offered him the job. Weeks later, Daniel settled into his new role, learning fast, working hard. Maya remained demanding but fair, never mentioning the plaza again. On his first anniversary, she stopped by his desk. You know, she said, people think leadership is about titles and power. But it's really about who you choose to help when it costs you something. Daniel smiled. He understood now. Missing that interview had not closed a door. It had opened the right one. And somewhere in the city, a broken elevator was finally being fixed.